Buenas tardes. Good evening. Thank you for participating in our first entrepreneurial forum. Forum building entrepreneurs and growing scalable business among Puerto Ricans and other New York Latino communities. I know it's a long title, but it's something dear to the center and also the Women's Venture Fund, who are bringing you this event today. My name is Jesus Maldonado Reyes, and I'll be the MC for today's event, introducing our host, Dr. Edwin Melendez, and our expert panelists in entrepreneurship and wealth creation today, which will focus on typical strategies and special challenges for Latinos facing raising capital and growing own business. We have our panelists came from Puerto Rico, from Los Angeles, so we're very pleased to have them here, and they took out of their time and busy schedules. How many entrepreneurs we have in the room? Half of them. Yeah. Yeah, with a show of hands.
People would like to be.
Oh, would like to be entrepreneurs. So, at this moment, I would like to very pleased introduce a dear friend and colleague, Dr. Edwin Melendez. He's a director of the Center of Puerto Rican Studies, known as Centro, and a professor of urban affairs and planning. He brings over 20 years of experience. Prior to Centro, he was a professor of management and urban policy at Milano New School for Management and Urban Policy. Without further ado, Dr.
Buenos días, buenas tardes. My role here is a very brief one, but I will try to get us moving quickly. First, I really like to thank all the organizers, María and Jesus and everyone else. All the staff that put time in trying to have a pleasant event for us. But second, I'd like to say a couple of words about Centro. Let me introduce to you a wonderful document here, which is a brochure for what we do in Centro. But let me give you the 1-minute version of this. Okay, Centro has 4 areas of work. The first and foremost one is to understand social conditions and other issues related to the Puerto Rican community in the United States. So we focus on research, we develop publications, we have the leading journal in the field, the Centro Journal. We also we publish books, and we have a vast publication program. The second thing we do, and it's very important, was added a few years after we were founded in 1973, is we have libraries, a library and archives. The library is the largest collection of Puerto Rican documents in the U.S., anywhere in the U.S., and with respect to the Puerto Rican community in the U.S., probably including Puerto Rico, or certainly including Puerto Rico, but almost certain that that's the case. But the archives is about preserving the historical heritage of the Puerto Rican community in the U.S. We have right now over 250 collections. We're also processing many new collections and trying to acquire very important collection for us, including some people that I would like to surprise you in a few months. But we have a very aggressive campaign to keep adding. Many of our pioneers are passing away or moving back to Puerto Rico and losing their records with them. So we're making an effort to catch up to that reality. We have assembled a group of leading scholars and practitioners in the field, and we have a tremendous advisory board that guide our work in that area. So we're moving now to new facilities in the Barrio, 118th and 3rd Avenue. They're beautiful. It's a state-of-the-art building. And those of you who had the opportunity to visit with us in September should do that. You'll be amazed at the new facilities. We have a larger space, certainly for the archives, that is completely climate controlled. We will have now a lot of our holdings with the library. We don't have to send for them upstate New York and so forth. So it's a wonderful event forthcoming. We're also going to have an inaugural exhibit that will be fantastic. Antonio Martorell is curating that, and we have 5 local artists creating work just for this exhibit. So that's coming in September. I'd like you to pay attention and come back to be with us up there. And we will announce what that, what those lineup of events is. This semester, the third thing that we do is education. I will get to events in a second. Education. We just started at Centro with a program to create Centro scholars, people that we will nurture from high school up to graduate school. We have a tremendous program in the pipeline, so we have started to develop courses and methodologies that will help and assist our students move forward. We also created a scholarship fund dedicated to our founder, Fran Bonilla, who passed away very recently. So the next thing that we do, in addition to education, is we do outreach. And events such as this one are very important to what we do. In June 9th, we will have an event for Fran Bonilla, dedicated to him. We will also have a video that we commissioned to some folks. The Grammy, many times Grammy winner Eddie Aguiar is directing the video, and we will also have an exhibit and posters and all kinds of celebrations into his memory, and that's happening June 9th. There are also other events. There is a conference, which I missed the date, in religious and Puerto Rican studies, religion and Puerto Rican studies, which is, Carlos, ¿cuándo es la fecha? May 5th. What? May 5th? May 5th, just around the corner. So thank you. Apologize for that. But in addition to events, we have a lot of a program in the internet. So if you haven't visited our new website, you should do so. We also have a special section within the website that is called Voices, and it's an electronic magazine that tends to interact with many of our, artists and poets and so forth. And so you should take a look at it. So in a nutshell, we have plenty of activities. We welcome you to this particular one. We like to say that though in the past we have paid somewhat erratic attention to, not to economics, but specifically to the whole question of entrepreneurship in our community, we're making an effort to do so. We just pass it around, or it's in, for your take in the entrance, a couple of studies. One is by Hector Cordero, well, both are by him, but this one is already published by in the Annals of Political Sciences. This one is work in progress that he will submit to the Central Journal, and what it does is takes a detailed look at the self-employed, a proxy for Puerto Rican entrepreneurs in New York State. We also have commissioned a couple more studies that Ramon Borges is involved, that will look at wealth creation, wealth accumulation using surveys, consumer surveys and other data that is rarely available for Puerto Ricans, because that identifier is so critical, and we don't get in too many surveys, but we identify a couple of them. So this is a first down payment. I promised Maria that we will continue working in this area, and I'm so thankful to the panelists. I mean, we really got a top tier panelist, but I want to prevent what Jesus is going to do next. So I'm going to let him take over and announce what our panelists, who the panelists are, and what their task is. So thank you very much.
Thank you. This time I would like to introduce the panelists, and I will start with Myrna Rivera. She's the founder and president and chief executive officer of Consultiva Internacional. She just flew from Puerto Rico yesterday or today? Yesterday. So she's here with us. The firm designs investment policy and strategy for institutions, individuals, and families. Ms. Rivera and the team at Consultiva have over 20 years of experience in the field of investment architecture. Consultiva clients span the spectrum of institutional entities, pension funds, endowments, and foundations, credit unions, union welfare plans, insurance companies, and public funds, with yield a special perspective about fiduciary needs as well as opportunities for economic development. Ms. Rivera has received numerous recognition for her leadership in financial services, such as the Joy Johnson Award of the National Association of Security Professionals for advancement in women and minorities in financial services, as well as a 2005 Highest Leaf Award for the Women's Venture Fund for Entrepreneurial Excellence. And recently, the 2006 Alumni Achievement Award from CUNY's Lehman College, her alma mater, and also she has appeared in the top 100 influential Hispanics of Hispanic Business Magazine. She received her bachelor's degrees in mathematics at the University of Puerto Rico, and also has a master's in graduate school from Lehman College, City University of New York. Welcome, Myrna Rivera, please pass along. George, you're the minority here today.
I always am.
Yeah, you are. And I would like to introduce George Herrera. He's the founder and president and CEO of Herrera Cristina Group. He resides in between Orlando, Virginia, and New York, and he just came and red-eye flight from Long Beach, California this morning, so his commitment is amazing. Mr. Herrera also serves as an independent director on the board of Fortune 500 Wyndham Worldwide Corporation, one of the world's largest hospitality companies. He serves as the chairman of his corporate governance committee. Prior to joining HCG, Mr. Herrera was the President and Chief Executive Officer of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, known as USHCC, where I met him previously. In this position, he ran the organization from 1998 to 2003. As the head of the USHCC, Mr. Herrera was primarily responsible for communicating the interests of over 1.5 million Hispanic-owned businesses across the country for both private and public sectors, addressing critical economic issues. While at the USHCC, he created the nationally syndicated television show Hispanics Today, which is viewed by more than 30 million viewers on NBC, CBS, and ABC networks throughout the United States. Prior to USHCC, Mr. Herrera served as the president of David Burgos and Associates. He also has received numerous awards and appointments, among them the recipient of the Mickey Leland Humanitarian Achievement Award by the National Association of Minorities in Cable, recipient of the Cesar Chavez Community Service Award by Minorities in Business Magazine, and is one of the most 100 influential Hispanics in America by Hispanic Business Magazine. Mr. Herrera is a nationally recognized expert and author in the fields of economic development legislation and policy for minority business development. And in 2000, Mr. Herrera was inducted as a fellow of one of the most prestigious business schools, the Wharton Society of Fellows, Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. Without further ado, George Herrera.
Thank you.
And last but not least, our co-sponsor then, our dear friend and panel moderator, María Otero. She's the president and founder of the Women's Venture Fund. The fund is celebrating its 14th year, and this year I was able to participate in their NASDAQ closing bell, which was very exciting, and she was recognized by the City Council and the Mayor's Office and the Women-Owned Business Week here in New York City. Maria, prior to this, worked in Albany, working with issues in government for Latinos and minorities. Maria received her bachelor's degree from Queens College. She's a Bronx native and received a law degree from one of the premier law schools, University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, María Otero. Thank you.
So, well, first I have to turn it on. So today's panel was really an effort that came out of several conversations about where are Latino entrepreneurs and why don't we see many more of them that are bigger. So after an exhaustive round of calls to every Latino entrepreneur that anybody knew, it became, fairly evident that there were some real issues in terms of how we go about building businesses and what were some of the typical strategies that seem to be unavailable to us as a community. So I put together what I thought would be a panel who could not only speak about specific strategies and share experiences of how they've grown businesses and how they've raised capital, but also two entrepreneurs who are very passionate about this issue and about recommending policies that could make a difference. So with that, I'm very pleased to open this discussion today and to just start with a general question. Why aren't there more businesses that are at a higher level of success within the Latino community and in the Puerto Rican community in particular?
George? Okay, I'll take it first. They're deferring to the minority. I'm always in the position. I was raised by my mom and two sisters, and I have 3 daughters, and I'm in between 2 women. So I'm always a minority. Pero first, Maria, muchas gracias, and thank you for the Centro for allowing an opportunity to come back. I'm originally from Brooklyn, so it's always good coming back home. But to answer the question, I mean, in terms of the growth and development of the Latino business community, Hispanic business community in the United States, I mean, it comes down to access to capital. And unfortunate is not access to what we traditionally know as debt capital, but really is access to what we, like to call private equity or equity capital. Because what basically happens is, a lot of these small Latino-owned companies start to do well, start to grow their businesses, and their only means of growing their business is to go out and try to secure loans, which is debt capital. And after a certain period of time, your financial statement can only sustain so much debt capital that it reaches a point where a financial institution will say, your balance sheet just cannot sustain any more additional debt for you to continue to grow. So you kind of run into a brick wall. So what happens is that, we need to be able to cultivate an environment where Hispanic and Latino-owned businesses are going to be able to be players in the private equity arena. And it's a foreign arena for Latinos because it's an area that we just haven't participated in. It's an area that private equity firms are usually looking to make that large investment, which can be a 10 or 15 or $20 million investment. And what happens to that small Latino entrepreneur who may be doing $500,000 or $1 million a year and is trying to get to the next level? So, the problem becomes is how do we look at creative strategies to deal with putting together private equity funds and going out and being able to convince the private equity community that you have a business enterprise that is conducive for their type of investment. Now, you're going to hear statistics, one of the statistics that you hear all the time is that Latinos are the fastest growing segment of the small business community, and Latinas are growing at 6 times faster than the small business community. And we have 2.5, approaching 3 million Latino-owned businesses in the United States. But here's the telling statistic. Of the 3 million Latino-owned businesses in the United States, only 29,000 have revenues of over $1 million. Only 29,000 of 3 million have revenues of over $1 million. So the issue then becomes obviously how do we start to try to expand, that mom and pop family-owned type of business to another level. And I think we'll talk about some creative ideas and maybe show you some examples as we go along, in this conversation as to, how I took an approach and we in the Latino community at the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce decided to tackle that issue probably, as we move down. But I want, Myrna to be able to also comment, obviously.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for this invitation. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. The other side of this, I think, to add to George's comments, have to do with who the potential investors could be and the limitation that we find in our own communities in finding people, small institutions, entrepreneurs, who are prepared to invest in the businesses of other entrepreneurs. So when your balance sheet does get loaded up with debt, and you need to find partners who have a common vision, who see the value proposition in your business enterprise, and who are prepared to take on business risk with you, the well is empty. And why is that? And that's something that's been very near to my heart for many years, because not only because I'm an entrepreneur, but I happen to be an investment advisor. And so one of my jobs is advising pension funds and endowments on fiduciary responsibility, on asset allocation. And we have a culture as Latinos in Puerto Rico, in particular, in Puerto Rico and outside of Puerto Rico, we come from a culture of understanding yield. We do not understand total return as a community, we understand yield. And so when we think about an investment opportunity, we think about the rent or the cash flow that I will derive. We do not think about growth. And hence, if you are going to approach a wealthy entrepreneur, or it's just a wealthy person in our community, they have a choice of what to do with that money they've got. They can buy, in Puerto Rico, you can buy a Ginny Mae which is a pool of mortgages that are guaranteed by the federal government. And we have managed to construct a tax protocol in our jurisdiction that if the underlying mortgages of that Ginnie Mae are derived from residences in Puerto Rico, and you happen to be a resident of Puerto Rico, the income, the interest income that you derive is tax-free. So here's the perfect investment. You have guarantee of the federal government, you make monthly cash flow, and it's tax-free. And it's also estate transfer tax-free, which is important for those of us who were born and intend to die in Puerto Rico. And so you're competing with this, and it just perpetuates this psychology that as an investor, I am seeking yield and not total return. So growth is not part of the equation, and it hasn't had to be part of the equation for decades. In Puerto Rico, there was an emergence of the middle class that came through the power of somebody else's money, somebody else coming on and bringing outside capital. And the University of Puerto Rico was creating the intellectual capital to make those companies be successful in Puerto Rico. Entrepreneurship didn't have to be part of that equation. So we don't have to go very far when we try to figure out why do we have this deficit in thinking. That is changing now. It's having to change. Porque la necesidad es la madre de la invención. And it's having to change. But that side of it is, you're looking for debt because that's what you've learned to do. And then the potential investor who could be potentially that risk taker with you is also all about debt. And so growth, which means equity, which means taking on business risk, has not been part of the equation until very, very recently in our community.
So we hear these statistics, as George was saying, about this growing and dynamic community, and generally the statistics are for the Latino community overall. And we know that on the national level, they're saying that there's 37% increase in businesses. And here in New York State, there's a 57% increase in business ownership among Latinos. But typically, these statistics are really skewed heavily to individuals who have tiny businesses or self-employed and aren't necessarily even looking at growth. So in order to get past this issue, we're going to really focus most of this discussion on what does it take for a business that has reached that $1 million but can't get beyond that. How do they get to the next level? How can we help establish regional businesses so that the resources and the tools that are necessary for businesses to make those bigger leaps are available? And so I think Myrna started to talk a little bit about the psychology, if you will, of Latinos. Is that something that you think is in our DNA, that we can't have angel investors? Why is it that when we look at traditional strategies in other communities for business development, a typical strategy involves tapping angels? Where are the angels that we can tap that are also Latinos?
Wow. There are some informal groups. I can speak to about Puerto Rico. There are some informal groups that are dormant and then awake, and then they're dormant. And recently they're awake again. But they're small, not really formally organized groups. They are wealthy, successful business people who have come through this generation, what I call los hijos de Lela, which is this emergence of this extraordinary middle class and entrepreneurial activity, although small, that emerged as part of the development of the middle class in Puerto Rico in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on. It is not a formal, as I said, there is no formal construct to this, but there is some bit of interest. But again, one of the things that I find in advising some of these ladies and gentlemen is that they are very prepared to take business risk in their businesses. They'll tell you that they will take the risk in that which they understand. So if they're in construction, they will take the business risk there. If they're in the arts, they will take the business risk there. But once they exit and the cash is on the other side of the table, it's a Ginnie Mae's. It's over. I need guarantee, I need to conserve my capital. And so it's capital that comes from the development of the markets that doesn't return into the markets. So the wealth creation process has an exit. It doesn't recycle back. And what do we need in order for it to recycle back? We need a government that doesn't compete with us for capital. Puerto Rico's government, as many municipal and state governments, has an insatiable appetite for entering into debt. And so if you can get 6% or 5% tax-free, you're right back to where you started from. This is what we're competing with. I found in my personal experience in financing that second round for Consultiva, I mean, the first round was the typical, mortgage the house, put up all the collateral, and secure a credit line with your life as collateral. But in the second round, and we thought about this, how are we going to dance around the psychology? And we came up with sort of a hybrid of a convertible preferred share that had a little bit of both and had an interesting coupon and so forth that it can convert to equity in the event of an exit of some liquidity event. But when we talk to others, it is a very new topic really in general.
George, do you want to add to that? And maybe you can talk a little bit also, since you're so familiar with how debt is put as the forefront solution for minorities. Is that contributing to the lack of development of angels or other investors looking to invest in Latino businesses?
Yeah, I think it's real difficult for that to emanate out of our own community, simply because I don't think the Capital Foundation is there yet. But I think one of the things that we need to do is really to start to think outside of the box and look at public-private sector types of collaboration, and how is it that we leverage some of the assets that we in the Latino community have that you hear every day when you hear census numbers and you hear the Hispanic consumer purchasing power is going to be close to $1 trillion. Well, let's think about it, and let me put this out here so that maybe we can have a conversation about it, particularly with the private sector, with the Fortune 1000 companies, because I think that we need to change the relationship that we have with Fortune 1000 companies so that it becomes a reciprocal business relationship, that I think that we can establish a mechanism for economic development and empowerment. And if we're spending $1 trillion in consuming the products and services of Verizon, of Walmart, and all of these major companies, why is it that we're then still letting that company dictate how their relationship with us? See, that paradigm, I think, has to change. And I think we need to now say, whoa, hold on a second. If you want us to continue to be brand loyal to Walmart, be brand loyal to Verizon, we need to have a conversation on a reciprocal business relationship. And that's how I approached my tenure at the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce when I went about trying to create a private equity fund. Because I ran up against the problem that we had more the emerging Latino entrepreneur that was doing $5 or $10 million a year. And what I was looking to do is, how do I take that $5 or $10 million a year entrepreneur and make him or her a $30 or $40 or $50 million? Because why? Because they'll employ more of our people. Okay? So I decided to say, well, you know what? I'm going to go and talk to some of these major corporations who love to put in their propaganda how loyal the Hispanic community is to that company, and ask them, well, how loyal are you to us in the areas that are important to us, not in the areas that you deem to be important to us. So I went to Verizon. I went to 46. What really happened was I gave a speech in San Diego, and I said I wanted to create a Hispanic private equity fund. And in 2001, and it was covered by the front page of the Marketplace of the Wall Street Journal, and I gave the speech on a Thursday. That following Monday, I get a call from, at that time, Jamie Dimon, CEO of Bank One in Chicago. Okay, yes, the same Jamie who is now CEO and chairman of JP Morgan Chase. And Jamie said, George, I read this article about what you want to do. Will you come out and talk to us, because we have an interest in trying to have a dialogue with you about this fund. What is it that you're looking to do? So after, some conversations with them, he said, well, George, we want to invest the first $5 million in your fund if you let us select the fund managers. And I said, sure, as long as the fund managers are Latinos. Then you can select them. You can do the due diligence on them. But there's no way, with all due respect, that I'm going to have 2 Anglos running a Latino fund. Because that's not happening. And on my flight back from that trip, I'm reading the Wall Street Journal. There's an article of what a great corporate citizen Verizon is to Latinos. And I said to myself, you know, I wonder how many of the pension dollars that Verizon has are they investing in Latino investment instruments? Wealth creation. Okay, going and thinking outside of the box and going to that corporation and saying, no, I want to have a different conversation with you. Okay, I don't want to talk to you about buying a table at the local Hispanic organization or putting a float in the Puerto Rican Day Parade. That's all cool. That's fine. I'm not against floats in the Puerto Rican Parade. Okay, I come to the city and I enjoy it, and my family does. We need a blueprint for economic empowerment in the United States, and we need to hold corporate America accountable if we're driving the profits of corporate America. So I called Ivan Seidenberg at Verizon. I went down to 42nd and 6th, and I sat down with Ivan and I said, Ivan, you know, I'm curious. This great article came out, and you're talking about what a great corporate citizen you are with Latinos. How many of your dollars is being invested in Latino investment instruments? And he said to me, George, probably 0. What do you got? And I says, well, you know, here's a private placement memorandum. We're trying to get a fund off the ground. We got a $5 million commitment from Jamie Dimon at Bank One. Would you take a look at it? He says, yeah, we will. We'll take a look at it. About 3 weeks later, we get a call from Ivan. He says, George, you know, our CFO has reviewed it. We like what you have here. We're going to invest $10 million in your fund. People said, how'd you get to Verizon to do that? I said, I asked. But I went with a business plan. And I changed the dialogue of Verizon driving how they're going to engage the Latino community to us driving, telling them how we think they can be, you know, more corporate responsive to my community. And what was important to me was creating this fund. You know, at the end of the day, we raised $100 million. We started a fund called Hispania Capital Partners, headquartered in Chicago. Managed by two Latinos who run the fund. They just closed their second fund. They raised another $175 million. They're investing in Hispanic entrepreneurs throughout the country. But I give that as an example of looking outside of the box. And for the small Latino entrepreneur, we have to get away from the syndrome that it's all mine, it's all mine, it's all mine. I don't want to give up a piece, I don't want to give up a piece. Then you know what? You're not going to grow. Because that's not how the capital markets work. Do you want to own 100% of a $500,000 company, or would you might have more interest owning 60 or 70% of a $5 million company? So if you want to get investors, you have to get out of this mindset that you don't want some partners in your company. And that doesn't mean that they're running your company. Usually an equity investor is not really interested in coming in and running the day-to-day. They have made a decision that you have the management, technical, financial skill sets in place so that if I'm going to make this investment, I feel that the investment is going to be secure. So we also need to start to think big and start to look at strategic partners, strategic alliances. How can I, you know, joint venture, or how can I merge with another company within my space that now this $500,000 company can become a $3 or $4 million company. We now have a stronger balance sheet. We can now go out and leverage different accesses to capital markets that we may not have an opportunity if we continue to think small. You know, you're going to end up staying. You're going to end up staying small.
Did you want to add something to that?
Now, that last point that George mentions about ownership and what you want to be an owner of. Aging has a very special way of helping us all understand this issue. I can, again, just speak for myself. Over time, you realize you can be the chief cook and bottle washer and have a heart attack and not see the fruits of your labor, or you can engage with others of common thinking, who may or may not be Latino, by the way.
That's right.
May or may not be Latino. The minute you step out of the box, and in my case it was through education conferences, crisscrossing the country, either being on a panel or you're sitting in the audience, and being in the room with other people of like thinking, magic happens. Because you start having conversations of another level. And you begin to bump into people, if you like to envision as I do, and visualize and articulate the visualization exercise, and you find yourself with other people who like to do the same thing, it's amazing what you can construct. And circumstances align themselves, and the assets and the passion shows up. But we need to step out of a box, whether the box is the neighborhood, whether it's a gender issue, whether it's a geographical limitation, whether it's a business model, or whether it's a sense of, I need to own the whole thing. Whatever the box is, if you just step out of it, if you just trust and step out of it, and trust your own intuition and your vision, you will provoke circumstances, and people, you will attract people and circumstances. And over time, you realize, I realized, how important and valuable that was for not only my success as a business, but my happiness as an individual. And my ability then to re-energize, to reset my clock, to be more engaging with employees, to continue to grow the business. Because you have a conversation of a higher level with people of like thinking. But you need to stop thinking about being the boss and being the owner. And the younger we are, perhaps, the less inclined, because we think time is, all on our side, and we're immortal. And a close encounter with mortality does the trick. A friend dies, somebody gets sick who you love very much. You lose a relationship, you lose a partner. Something happens in your life that tells you, you are mortal too. Check it out and set up your priorities. And in my case, it was all about, how did I want to engage in this business, which I love, it's my passion, it's my life. How do I want to engage in it? And it became far more about leaving a legacy and figuring out how this business, this thing that we do, could outlive me. And I had to step out of the box, and it's been wonderful. Painful, but wonderful.
So some of the things that you're touching on is that in order for a scalable business model to emerge, that some of the sort of traditional thinking that we've been encountering with first-time entrepreneurs or small business owners is that it's too limiting, and that they're not networking in a way that's effective to allow them to access resources that they will need down the line. I know that you both have stressed that in earlier conversations, so if there are specific tips that you want to give on these issues that go to the psyche of getting yourself out of the box to helping you begin to move towards developing scalable models, let's touch on that at this point.
Well, to follow up what Myrna was just saying also, is for Latino entrepreneurs, you got to get out of your comfort zone, and start to make yourself accessible in the circles where the capital is. And many times we want to continue to patronize these typical, Latino types of events. People always say to me, "Oh, you're going to Somos Uno up in Albany." I said, si yo quiero una fiesta, I'm not going to Albany to go to Somos El Futuro. I'd rather go to the New York Chamber of Commerce, find out who's there, and start to talk to some of these people.
Have a debate.
And have a debate and have a conversation and let them know that, this Boricua from Bed-Stuy can sit down in a room and talk to you about business and about opportunity. So part of it is getting out of this comfort zone and taking the risk and being able to go out there. I never envisioned being raised by my mom that, now at my age, that 6 years ago, I will be sitting on the board of directors of a Fortune, 500 company, of a Fortune 50 company. And I'm a product of Bed-Stuy, but I'm also living proof that it can happen if you do the right thing, and you also network within certain circles that will help you, that will propel you to try to reach that goal that you're looking to attain. So many times when people say to me, how can I go about, getting capital? How can I go about, George, how can I sit on a Fortune board? I said, well, you need to start finding out where Fortune board of directors are. Where are they? Where are they meeting? Where are they having them right? Are they playing golf? Are they going to different activities. Where are they socializing in? Where are they meeting? Because people tend to do business with people that they know and that they feel comfortable with. And one of the things that we need to learn in our community is that we need to get out of this old paradigm and not be scared to take the risk, not be scared to involve yourself within those networks that are out there that are conducive to what it is that you're looking to attain in your company. If that's access to capital or private equity capital, you know, you're going to have to take a ride downtown or to Wall Street or start to meet or educate yourself as to who are these private equity companies that are out there. How can I learn more about them, and how can I develop my business or establish a strategy to become a scalable company so that, you know, we have at least an opportunity to be considered for that type of private equity. So again, I think that it's very, very important that, you know, we get out of our comfort zone and we understand that, you know, we need to be able to immerse ourselves in those circles that are conducive to what it is that we're looking to attain, because, you know, it's very doable. Look, we're in the year 2011. Of the Fortune 1000 companies in the United States, there are 10,150 board of director seats. There are 10,150 board of director seats in the Fortune 1000 companies. Of those 10,150 seats, I am one of 142. There are only 142 Latinos and Latinas that sit on a Fortune 1000 board of directors. I find that appalling. When then you want to continue to throw around Hispanic purchasing power, we're spending $1 trillion. What are you doing with it? How are we as a community leveraging? Where is our political leaders? How are they now sitting down and taking a social service agenda and transforming that into an economic development conversation for our community to really empower our community? Okay, I'm a firm believer that is absent. I'm a firm believer that we're, you know, and that's a whole nother conversation.
We're going to come to that one in just a minute. So,
but that'll get us into a whole nother conversation.
That's a good one. By the way, there's nothing wrong with wanting to stay where we are. It's a quality of life decision.
Right.
You may choose, and I know a lot of people in Puerto Rico who, you know, make a certain amount of money are perfectly happy with that amount of money because they've got the house in La Parguera and they've got the apartment in Fajardo and they have the boat, and it's paradise and it works and it's wonderful. So there's nothing wrong with not wanting to go in another direction. But if you do, then you've got to break it. And Puerto Rico is a great lab because it's big enough that it's very diverse. It's diverse by class, it's diverse by religion, it's diverse by, you name it. You pick a category and we've got diversity in Puerto Rico, but it's small enough that you can see the moving parts. So you can figure things out in Puerto Rico, and there's some people here who from Puerto Rico who know, you want to figure something out, you make one phone call at 9 in the morning, and that phone call makes a second phone call, and by 4 o'clock you figured it out. You know what the moving parts are. So that's a good part, but the bad part is that if you're stuck in that social paradigm, you are expecting that somehow magically that same confined, you know, ombliguista paradigm is going to somehow reinvent itself into something else. And if you're sitting around waiting for that to happen, whether it's in Puerto Rico or in our Puerto Rican communities in the US, that it's not going to happen. And I think that's to George's point. I had a fascinating experience with Aspida. I was on the board of Aspida for 15 years, a national board of Aspida. If anybody here knows about Aspida, it's a wonderful organization, but the politics among the Puerto Ricans of Aspida is a case study in sociology of the Puerto Rican community, because you have Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico, Puerto Ricans from New York, Puerto Ricans from Illinois, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Florida, and they're all different. And when you try to chair a meeting and walk in with the assumption that everyone seems to think the same way and see things the same way, you are surprised. And chairing those meetings was quite a challenge. I chaired that board for 6 years. So the things that happen in Puerto Rico, they resonate here. We carry certain things. We're very different in terms of attitudes and how how histrionic we can be in our expressions and the way we want to emphasize our thinking. But there are some root issues that are absolutely the same across the communities. And it has to do with an entire generation or several generations that grew up in a time of extraordinary prosperity and became educators and became other things and not entrepreneurs. And when we're trying to figure this out, we really believe that somehow the community is going to take care of us, that somehow the capital is going to come from elsewhere, that somehow the change in the paradigm is going to be motivated by some external force that will hit us like a meteor. And it doesn't happen that way. It really does have to come from the inside out. And so we need to be the ones who step out. We can take executive courses. Harvard has an extraordinary continuing education program, executive courses, executive training on a number of different things. So does Stanford, so does MIT. Let's look for them. Let's go there. Let's bring in people from other communities. In Puerto Rico, for example, they're trying to develop private equity. Grupo Guayacán, for example, has a very interesting program. It's called the Business Accelerator. And basically they're looking for business people who, with certain characteristics. It's a long story, but the bottom line is that they bring in intellectual capital from the United States, from other types of incubators and business accelerator programs that have worked elsewhere. So we can imitate. Imitating is okay. They bring them in and they tell us how to do it. And it's beginning to get traction at a very important time. So we do have to look at the box from a different angle and bring in whatever elements. We need to step out. It is very urgent this time in history for all of us.
So talking a little bit about that and the fact that maybe we can learn more from others, in the series of calls that I made, I spoke to Latinos from other communities who indicated that when they were an entrepreneur in their native country, it was easy for them to raise capital. But when they came here, it's not so easy. Why do you think that might be?
Raising capital from here?
Raising capital from the United States for the businesses that they had in whatever country they were in Latin America.
Well, I mean, no, I think it's inherent. It's, you know, the United States does a great job of investing our money. Okay, in Latin, and with all due respect, in Latin America, in the Middle East, and other countries. So this Latino entrepreneur who can be in Ecuador or in Panama is there and is accessing capital for their business in their country that's U.S. dollars. Then they're surprised when they come here and they have difficulty, okay, trying to open up a business here, and the difficulty that they have in accessing capital in this country, which many of them end up going back and saying it's easier for me to run my business over there because I'm getting the infusion of U.S. capital to help my business. And again, it goes back to, you know, an old paradigm of, you know, and again, that'll go down a whole nother path of a political discussion in terms of, you know, are we truly, you know, looking at dollars that are being invested to assist those here that need, you know, that kind of access to capital, when we very easily, you know, write checks and are always talking about unlocking the doors of free trade and free trade and free trade. How about free trade in Main Street? Okay. How about free trade in our, you know, Latino and African American communities, you know, in this country here, and developing proactive mechanisms to really establish, you know, true economic empowerment. I'm a firm believer that all of these leading Latino national, we need to develop a national Hispanic economic development blueprint. We need a blueprint on that. We need to start to instill in Latino youth that you got to go to school, but when you're going to college, start thinking about becoming the employer, not the employee. Don't go to school and graduate and say, I can't wait to go work for someone else. No. Why don't you think about becoming your own boss? But part of the problem, with all due respect to all the major fine, you know, educational institutions in this country, is we do a poor job of marketing the successful Latina and Latino entrepreneurial role models, so that they can see that there's a Linda Alvarado in Denver, Colorado, you know, that owns over, you know, 100 Taco Bells and Pizza Hut, and is the owner, one of the owners of the Colorado Rockies baseball team, and she exists, and she's one of us. I go through elementary schools where I talk to, you know, primarily Latino youth, and I have a slide presentation. I put a picture up of J-Lo, and I ask them how many know who she is. The whole class raises their hand. I, you know, put in, you know, a picture of Alex Rodriguez. The whole classroom raises its hand. I then throw up a picture of Linda Alvarado. Not a person raises their hand. Okay? There's something wrong with that. There is something, especially when we have, you know, such a huge dropout rate, and our kids are not being prepared for the challenges of the 21st century. So I think one of the things that we can do is to try to establish, you know, at least a recognition that entrepreneurship is a career alternative. And one of the ways that we do that, I think, is by having panels like this, discussions like this, and putting in front of emerging Latino students entrepreneurial success stories and role models, so that they can see and say, you know, I want to be Myrna in 10 years. Because if she did it, I can do it. You know, it's feasible, I see it. And that's why they seem to go, you know, after that whole entertainment and sports arena, because that's what we brand, that's what the media brands, and they feel that, you know, that's a quick item. We all know that that's, you know, that's a roll of a dice, that's a 1 in a million shot that you're going to be an A-Rod or a J-Lo. It's just very difficult.
So let's talk a little bit about this paradigm shift that both of you are recommending here. Let's say I am now an entrepreneur, and given the current economic environment that we are working in as Latinos, I have a business. I've made my first $1.5 million. I know, I've heard of the Hispanic Capital Fund and others like that, because there are several funds that one can go to if you have a business that needs 10 million or more in capital. But I'm not ready for 10 million. That's not what my balance sheet will support. But I am ready to go to 3 million. Where do I go today?
Well, I think that's where the dialogue now changes to how do we look at the resources that are out there and start to think out of the box, and how do we leverage those assets that we have in our community. You know, if I'm an elected official in New York State and I have a company that comes up to me from some type of regulatory issue, and I'm representing my constituency, I'm going to ask that CEO first, ¿Cuántos Latinos sit in your corporate boardroom? We're going to get to your issue of regulatory change, but I have certain questions for you first. How many Latinos sit in your corporate boardroom? How many Latinos are direct reports to a CEO that control a budget? That control, not that's a vice president of community affairs. For I respect all those, you know, diversity positions that we Latinos always get. You know, community affairs, community manager, who can't sign a contract, can't give you money, can't sign a check, okay, but they have that position, okay? And then start to have a conversation with that company and say, well, you know what? I want to have a conversation with you on some ideas that I want to share with you in terms of unlocking that corporate boardroom. Okay, because I'm going to tell you, once you sit in that corporate boardroom, you have tremendous influence of how that corporation invests its money, who they hire, okay? If you have a corporate foundation, where those monies are going to, okay? I mean, the dialogue told, I can tell you, sitting on 2 Fortune boards, the requests that come in now, people, George, should we do this? And all you have to tell CEO is, I want this done. It's done. It's done. See, that's the good old white boy game. That's how it's played in corporate boardrooms. That's the reality. You may not like it. That's how it works. And nobody resigns from a board of directors seat. Nobody will leave it. It's great money for 20 days a year. Okay, now at the end of the day, I do have a fiduciary responsibility to my shareholders of that company, but I'm an advocate for diversity because it makes business sense. Because I tell my people at Wyndham, if Latinos are good enough to go lay in our beds and rent out rooms, then I don't want the jobs where we're only changing the sheets. I want to know how many direct reports we have, direct reports to the CEO, how many senior executive vice presidents we have. And by the way, bring the president of that foundation into the next board meeting, because I want to know how many checks have been cut to Latino organizations. That's power. You now have the ability to effectuate change. Okay, there are 802 companies of the Fortune 1000. 802 companies of the Fortune 1000 that have 0 Hispanic board participation. 0. Okay, you know how we can effectuate that change overnight through our political establishment, and if we were able to get our national organizations to concentrate on really driving an economic development agenda. So to go back to answer that question is, that's how we get out of the old paradigm of accepting how corporate America, and letting corporate America dictate to us their relationship with us. No. My community is the one that's driving your bottom dollar. I want to be at the table to tell you what I think my community needs, not what you want to nickel and dime me. Because at the end of the day, we're being nickel and dime every day. Our community's being nickel and dime every day, and until we decide that we're going to get together as a community to be able to establish a true agenda for economic empowerment, it's going to stay the same. It's going to continue to stay the same, and it's not going to change unless we're able to overcome some of these, barriers. And forget about Latino participation on board of directors. That's almost non-existent.
And the other angle and the other strategy that we need to get much more assertive about is in the arena of public policy. Let's look at the state of New York. State of New York, in its public pension systems, these are the deferred dollars. We lost the mic. These are the deferred dollars of deferred wages of the civil servants of the state of New York and the municipalities and the districts in the state of New York. The state and the city, or whomever the boss is, makes a contribution into a pool of money called the retirement system. New York City, for example, has 5 different retirement systems. They have New York City employees, they have New York teachers, etc. The sum of the monies, which are the deferred wages of the civil servants in the city of New York alone, adds up to almost $80 billion. This is money that we the people have that we don't know we have. Because where does that money come from? It comes from the taxpayers. It's part of the budget that comes from tax collection and contributes into the retirement systems, which is the inheritance or the heritage that's left of a time of civil service being, the gold standard that we all aspire to, especially the working communities, especially the communities of color. The state of New York has another $100 billion in its state pension system and has one sole trustee, who's the controller, who's an elected official. In the city of New York, the controller is also an elected official. And he or she has 5 deputy controllers, and one of them is responsible for pensions. So when we add up the money that is in these systems, it's about $200 billion more or less. In New York, when we step out of New York and look at the 5 states with the highest level of Latino communities in civil service, including Illinois, Texas, New Mexico, and California, the sum goes to $1.5 trillion. Now, we can say to these politicians, how is this money being invested? And I write investment policy for these funds, so I can tell you that there is an allocation because these funds have to grow at 8% and yada, yada, yada. And a piece of what happens for you to make 8% is that a piece of that money gets invested in what we call private equity. Private equity is an asset class. It's a form of investing money. Well, we can go to these states and city elected officials and ask the question, and here the gold standard is the state of Illinois. I have sat in public hearings in the state of Illinois. The Senate of the state of Illinois has created a pension commission. And every year, they round up all of the pension fund administrators of all of the different pension funds of the cities and the jurisdictions of the state. And they ask them, how much money is in your fund as of December 31? How many investment managers, the teams of the people who actually buy and sell securities on behalf of these funds, how many managers are there? How many Latino managers are there? How many women-owned firms are there? How many other categories of color in the ownership structure are there? How is your fund distributed by ownership? And then they get into the money stuff. How much did you pay in fees to money managers last year? How much did your fund, do you know what $20 billion does in fees? Half of 1% of $20 billion. Plus, all of that money is in the stock market and in the bond market. And how much did your fund generate in commissions last year? And where did all that money go? How many brokerage firms in your structure are Latino firms? And in the state of Illinois, they do this every single year to create what are called in-state private equity programs. This is having your cake and eating it too. This is saying there's $1 billion or $2 billion that are going to be destined to private equity. And what I'm going to do, because I'm an elected official and I care about the voters in the Latino community in my jurisdiction, is I am going to find investment professionals that are going to create these funds, my money, our constituents' money, I'm the trustee, and you, Credit Suisse or whomever, are going to create an in-state program for us. What does that mean? It means that you are going to invest our dollars back into our communities, to our business owners, because I know that I can make 8%. I know I can make my hurdle rate doing that. But I'm not satisfied just with making the economic return. I want to make a social return. I want to make a political return. This is a triple bottom line strategy. And I want to be able to say that we have recycled our own money. Our own money. Isn't that interesting? Right back into our communities in the form of investment, not donation, not charitable donations. This isn't, the gala ticket just to kind of like, watch somebody say, no. This is making money with our money, which in turn grows our communities, generates jobs, improves education, and overall improves the quality of life. Now, we need to hold our politicians accountable the same way we need to hold our corporate boards accountable, because it's our money. They all come to us at election time. And the line of questioning is really simple, is how much money in the pension fund is invested in economically targeted investing that generates the returns, but also creates secondary and tertiary level return. Jobs, higher education, keeps that money recycling in our own community. That's a wonderful line of questioning, and you'd be amazed at the faces that are made.
So we want to open up the program to questions, but the way that we'd like to do it is if you can write your question, and then Jesus will go and pick up questions, and we will then read the questions from there. So we will go, please start, and we'll start collecting them in a second. Edwin, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to ask you.
Yes.
How is the venture fund that you lead responding to this situation? What do you do, and how do you respond to the situation while people collect the questions?
Absolutely. So the Women's Venture Fund focuses on the women's community, not necessarily just Latinos. But I think that what we're talking about is helping women understand what it takes to be successful and how to grow businesses. And the way that we found has been most successful is, first, you have to work with the psychology of the entrepreneur, because what we've learned is that if you allow them to believe that the business model that they are trying to invest all of their resources and all of their energy in is really going to lead them to this dream that they have, you're going to waste a lot of time and burn through a lot of money. So for us, the first hurdle that we need to cross with the women that we're working with is their entrepreneurial mindset. Do they really understand what it takes to grow the business? And then be honest, do they want to grow? Not everybody really wants to grow. $500,000 in revenues may be exactly where they want to be. That could be all that they want to achieve, and that's fine. But I think that we need to be clear about that, because the strategies that you need to pursue to get to a $500,000 firm are very different than if you want to get to a $2 or $3 or $5 million firm. So that's one thing that we do. The second thing that we look at is where are there opportunities that we can help women to access. So to the extent that public policy has already defined that a certain percentage of government resources should be made available in contracts, then we will work with those agencies and help identify firms that can qualify for those types of opportunities. But when it comes to certain types of opportunities, we don't find Latina firms. So right now we're working with a particular state agency that has a major project in the Bronx, and they're looking for minority firms, but they don't have enough Latina-owned firms that are in the construction-related industries. So we're trying to see to what extent can we help them broaden their definition of who can qualify, or help to create a pool of more eligible businesses so that those future contracts will have a better chance of being going to these women-owned firms. So those are some of the things that we're talking about. I think that our panelists are also talking on a broader level about issues that require that we educate our policymakers and our elected officials. And I think it would be fair to say that one of the things that's implicit in what they're saying is that entrepreneurs have a role to play in educating elected officials. And if you're not playing that role and you're not helping them understand how they can change some of the levers that they have access to, whether it's corporate boards or legislation that affects how state dollars are dispersed, then you're also helping to keep the economic environment the way that it is. So does that answer what you were looking for?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Questions?
I think they brought the point that since it's a small forum that people can ask the question.
We'd like to have them written and collected, please. Thanks. So I think one of the things that we haven't talked about is what's the role of academia in this process? Because I think that it's an important role, and one of the reasons that I was excited about doing this in this particular forum, because I think that it can help with all of these policy issues that we've been talking about. So do either of you want to comment on that?
Well, is this one working?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think on the research area, there's a very, very important role to take a look at research. I mean, if I was here in New York State and running a program like this, and I wanted to venture into the Latina entrepreneurial sector, I'd start to inventory all of the major corporations, for example, that are headquartered here in New York. Take a look at, what I consider to be 4 important pillars within those communities. One is corporate governance, and that is, Latinas in their boardrooms. 2 is employment on the senior executive C-suite, what we call C-suite reports that are direct reports to his CEO. I look at philanthropy, where are they investing their money, in our community, and start to develop, and the other one is what we call supplier diversity. Okay, and that is the utilization of Latino and Latina businesses within the supply chains of corporate America. Okay, whether or not they're spending their money with Latino and Latina vendors. And I would look at those 4 pillars and start to develop report cards, and start what I used to like to say at the chamber, let's start outing these companies. Let's start outing these companies and putting them out there. Okay?
No fear.
Yeah, no fear. Going out, putting our bright Latina student talent to work, giving them all these case studies and telling them this is what we're going to do. And we're going to start to develop, a Fortune 500 report card here in New York State. Okay? And we may want to do a case studies on our Latino elected officials. And what are you doing to be able to advocate policies that promote economic development instead of grooming your son and daughter to take your position when you're turned out? Okay? And really being able to develop an ROI that's quantifiable for our community. Because, when Myrna talked about in terms of these pension funds, that's an enormous avenue. If we were able to have that similar type of program here in New York State, we wouldn't have to have this panel discussion on access to capital for Latino entrepreneurs, because they would be your own tax dollars. Just sit back and say to yourself, how many Latinos do we have on the public payrolls? I'm sure the number is huge in New York State, okay, that are investing into these pension pools. Why do we not have a program that money that we are contributing there is coming back into our community to help to provide access to capital for emerging Latino and Latina entrepreneurs? That's an ROI. It's not a giveaway. Okay, there's an ROI here. This fund has an ROI, so it's an investment. I'm not giving out a grant that you're going to get and you're never going to have to pay. You're going to have to repay it. Okay, but start to look again at creative, outside-of-the-box mechanisms that we can implement. But I really think that the time has come. We need to be aggressive. We need to start being aggressive and, you know, start to tackle, you know, a lot of these problems aggressively and publicly, and starting to, you know, to out some of these companies and say, hey, I'm sorry, you know, we're spending X number of dollars in you know, consuming your products and services, and the ROI to our community is just not there. And you'll see how quickly they're going to start to listen. See, the problem now is they got a free ride. No one's bringing up the discussions. You know why? Because they're determining how they're interacting with us. We're letting them determine how they're going to interact with the Latino community, as opposed to us going back and saying, no, here's the data, here's the research, this is what we're looking for, this is what we want from you.
I think there are two other things that come to mind with regard to the role of academia. One is in the formation of our business community, of our Latino business professionals, that we understand that part of your success and part of your ability to be a leader in a community and to be an agent of change is to know how to think and speak. And the hyper-concentration by disciplines, oftentimes, and this is across all schools, has created people with resumes and certificates that say that they know how to add and subtract. And when we ask them, tell me about yourself, tell me who you are, what you love to do other than be here. Why is the world a better place because you're here? They can't answer. And so part of being an entrepreneur, in my very personal opinion, is rooted in a liberal arts background. You must know you must know history, you must develop appreciation for aesthetics and for the arts. You must read the newspaper and understand current events. You cannot serve a community if you don't understand that community. And part of the formation of our business community, these are the leaders of the future. These are the people who will stand up and master a language and master a stage. And that's one of the huge responsibilities beyond the very detailed disciplinary issues that you must absolutely ice. If you are going to be a financial planner, or you are going to be a doctor or a dentist, or whatever it is you want to be, you've got to know your stuff cold. But you also have to have the grace to navigate in your community and to really separate yourself from the crowd. And you must dominate your language. You must know how to read and speak in public. You must know how to write. Why? Because it multiplies the effect that you have in that community. If you really want to be a leader and an agent, you've got to dominate the instrument with which you communicate. And you have to have things to talk about. So that background has to be far bigger than knowing Excel and PowerPoint. So that's one role of academia. And the other comes from the students themselves. And this is sort of marrying some of the ideas that we've already talked about. A lot of our universities have endowment funds, which are other big pools of assets that get invested, in some cases to, in all cases with the intent of perpetuating the institution. In some cases, some institutions tap those endowment monies more than others. Some use them for scholarships only, others use them for part of the operational budget of the institution. So I think an interesting idea might be to ask the question, how is the endowment of my university invested? And what companies are we investing in with our endowment dollars? And are those companies companies that we can feel proud of as per George's scenario? Are they engaging in the kinds of things that are important for our student body? And these are issues around responsible investing. How are we measuring corporate governance? How are we measuring the way that the companies that we invest in are generating their earnings? Are they generating their earnings by violating human rights, by discriminating by gender, by having no discrimination policies in place? So if you ask those questions, you can also affect, and as a student, doing that as a student or doing that as faculty helps us all to engage and really understand that it is all connected. We think it's not connected, but these are the same companies that George just pointed out. And so the question would be, why would you want your monies to be invested in the well-being of a company like he just described? And so those are questions that can come in an academic setting with all the seriousness and formality of the academic setting, and to learn to think. So by the time we're done and we're out of that setting and we're into the business world, we have this rich experience and background that has, number one, made us fearless. That doesn't mean it makes us hostile, right? In Puerto Rico we say, lo cortés no quita lo valiente. It teaches us to think. It teaches us to formulate the questions, and then it gives us the courage to ask the questions. That's where I think academia can have and play a substantial role in this.
One of the questions that came back was, earlier I gave this example of the $1 million firm trying to grow to $3 million. What strategies can you speak to that you used that didn't necessarily involve financing, but that helped you to grow your business to the next level? I know that you've talked about mergers and acquisitions, but maybe if we can go through some of the strategies that you've used. Yeah.
One of the things that we did, I think, right from the very beginning was really to visualize what our value proposition was, what it was that we thought made a difference in our community, and to spent a lot of time articulating the value proposition. And then figuring out, doing the market research. This is hard work, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. This is not something that just happens, over a weekend. As a matter of fact, we worked on this for 2 years. It's articulating a value proposition and understanding, and the three basic questions there are: what's the problem? How do you propose to solve it? And why do you believe your solution is better? If you can't answer those three questions, you really don't have a proposition that can become a business enterprise, a sustainable business enterprise. And so having done that, then it was about who are the potential clients? Who do we envision being able to provide this value added to? Who are they? Where are they? Who are the decision makers? And really understanding the culture of governance when it came to public funds, endowments, foundations. And this is how we learned a lot about how the shyness with regard to private equity, because eventually we get to asset allocation. So it was about marketing. So I think out of the gate, we made sure that we understood what our worst case scenario was and what we needed initially to be sustainable. And the metric we employed for that was 12 months revenue. And if we made the bet that if we, out of the gate, in 12 months, were not generating revenue to sustain ourselves through year 2, or at least through half of year 2, we were not a viable business enterprise. And so a lot of time was devoted to structuring that. Then we got to the point where we needed more money. And so the revenue is coming in, but then once the revenue is coming in, you have to make a decision. Do you want to be the person that runs the business, or and have a heart attack, or can you recognize that you need now a director of finance, that you need a compliance officer, that you need this and you need that, and your business tells you what it needs. You may not have to start it with all of that stuff, but eventually it tells you that you need it. And that's where it can get tricky, because it happens in that space where you're at $1 million to $1.5 million in revenue, and then you want to go to $5 million, and then all of a sudden you need more players. And so it became a question of attracting people. In our case, we talked to people who loved the company, who fell in love with the vision, and who were willing to take the business risk in another way by making less salary, in exchange for an equity in the company, for example. So we got the intellectual capital in, and there's nothing like having people in the room who love the business, who pick up the phone and call everybody they know to tell them what they're involved in. And that took care of part of it. Eventually we needed to get more capital in. And the way we did it was through a convertible preferred stock issue. Not a lot, but enough. Again, we just reran the numbers and said we need money for another 18 months just to make sure that we're going to be okay. And just have a stash of cash on the side, and that's how we did it.
So we've now heard bootstrapping was a first step, then she did clear delegation, and then ultimately financing. Do you want to talk about a different path?
No, I mean, I think it's, it's obviously also, I think, understanding your client, understanding who is your client. And again, it's all about that value-added proposition and understanding where the economy is in the year 2011. It's truly a global marketplace, and it comes down to you being able to provide a value-added proposition to a lot of these corporations. If you're a company that is looking to sell, let's say, to Fortune 500 companies, is understanding what is the supply chain of that company and where in that supply chain, where are the intersecting points in that supply chain that I feel that my value-added proposition can be most effective, and where can I then go out and try to identify, that opportunity for us. And 95% of the cars that you are all driving right now, 90% of that car is being outsourced somewhere in the world. Okay, only about 10% is actually being manufactured in Detroit. I mean, you saw with the problem that they had in Japan, that I think Toyota now cannot get red paint for their certain reds of their cars. Okay, yeah, because the earthquake and tsunami affected their ability to have that supplier provide that product to them. You're in a technology environment now. I mean, you're in a technology environment, so you need to understand that your competitor can be thousand miles away, and it's could be undercutting you in price, but price isn't always the bottom line to major companies. Sometimes they want to see the person, they want to feel the person, they want to attach a face to a name. So it's really understanding what your marketplace is, but truly is recognizing that we are in a global marketplace where there's a lot of different indicators that can affect your ability to be able to be profitable, and it's understanding what are those elements and parameters that can affect you from being able to position yourself as a company that provides a quality product at a competitive price on time, because that's really what it usually comes down to.
And another typical strategy that's used in that size firm to help them jump over to the next level is to do joint ventures. So you don't necessarily have to have a formal partnership, but you do decide to go in together on a particular deal, and that allows you to participate in a project that you would not be big enough to handle on your own. So networking and establishing those relationships early on is really important, so that when you're ready to move to the next level, you already have a relationship with companies that you're going to want to do business with, and they already have a relationship with you, so that there's a certain level of trust that can be tapped.
Yeah, and what's important there also is that in corporate America, you're having what's seen now as vendor downsizing. About 5 years ago, Ford Motor Company had like 10,000 vendors. Today they have like 1,000 vendors, and they'd rather give Maria that contract and say, you worry about these 10 subcontracts, because I no longer want to deal with 11 different vendors. I'll give it to you, and you go ahead and you handle all the subcontracts, and you worry about in the supply chain, you worry about delivering this product to me. So if you happen to be a small, let's say, trucking company, and you may be competing against trucking companies that also have warehousing space. Well, if you're a trucking company and you don't have a warehouse space, you may want to start to go out and say, well, what company is out there that has warehousing space that I can now go and do a joint venture and say, well, you know what? I was a trucking company yesterday that had no warehousing capabilities, but now I'm going to go ahead and bid on this contract and have an opportunity of winning and getting 50 or 60% of a contract, than knowing that you were going to bid it and not even be able to be competitive because you didn't have the necessary resources to be able to fulfill the requests of that corporation. So again, it's strategic alliances, it's joint venturing, it's seeing, where you think you can develop relationships that, again, allow you to provide a value-added proposition to your customer.
And on the cost side, the same thing can happen.
Right.
In our business, for example, we're seeing a lot of, it's a cottage industry that's evolving. We're a highly regulated industry, and so issues of compliance, legal, that seemingly don't add to the bottom line, but suck capital, can be very, very challenging for small businesses. All of a sudden you realize that there's part of an infrastructure that you never thought you needed. You didn't think about it, but it turns out that you now not only require it, but that it's going to take 25 to 30% of your budget. And so how do you make that a lesser cost? Well, one of the things that can happen, and I'm sure that in a number of different industries it occurs, is that you can really examine those fixed costs and find sources, either through another company or independent sources, where that cost can be shared with others. And that's created, in a number of different disciplines, outsourcing mechanisms. And so you can look at it on the cost side and say, well, who are the advisors that can help us to take care of these fixed issues that we need to take care of that are not revenue-related expenses, they are fixed expenses. The revenue-related expenses we don't have so much trouble with because it's a bet, it's a strategy, the alliance strategy is one. But when you have fixed expenses that you feel are hungry, at your rent, your utilities, is how do you get your head around those expenses and manage them? They can kill the business because it's a fixed expense, whether there's a dollar coming in the door or not. You've got to be able to tie that down. So figuring ways of tying the fixed expenses is also very important. And that can happen through alliances as well.
So the last question that we have time for today is, how important is it to you that entrepreneurs have successful role models? Did either of you have parents that were entrepreneurs or other members of your family that were entrepreneurs?
Well, for me, I went to school and I thought got a communications degree, and I thought I was going to be the first Latino on ESPN because I wanted to be a sportscaster. And lo and behold, I graduated, and my sister out in Long Island in 1974, 75, was starting a consulting practice. She wanted to start a management and financial consulting firm. She had 2 other employees. They used to meet in the basement of our home. And she asked me if I wanted to join the company. I said, I know nothing about management and financial consulting. She says, well, I'm going to teach you. And the market we were going after was federal government contracting and what was called the minority business development space, where we wanted to lend out services to agencies like the U.S. Small Business Administration, the New York State Department of Transportation. But, well, to make a long story short, by 1980, my sister ended up saying, okay, George, at that time we had about 6 employees. And she says, George, you're the communications guy, so you're going to go out and develop the brand. And, for this company, I'm going to handle the management and administration, and let's start to sell this company. And we just, developed a business plan, brought in the necessary resources, and by 1982, we had 10 offices, 125 employees, and at that time, we were the largest Hispanic-owned management and financial consulting firm in the country. And I worked for my sister for 21 years before I left the family-owned company to become the president and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Now,
and you haven't nominated her for the highest leaf award.
Shame on you.
She's retired. But that was our role model. I mean, like the generations that we grew up in. Our parents probably did not go to college, let alone probably finish high school. But en nuestra casa that we were going to college, even though they probably didn't go to high school. We were going to college, and my sisters were the first 2, and I knew that there was no way I was getting out of not going to go to college and get my degree because it was instilled. It was instilled in us, and my sister kind of became the role model for us, and we grew it, and now my daughter's an entrepreneur. My other daughter's starting to become an entrepreneur. So, yeah, we had successful role models that I guess the next generation, wants to emulate and get involved. And again, it was in the 70s where it wasn't fancy for a Latina to be an entrepreneur in 1975 and 76. I mean, it was extremely tough. Nobody wanted to do, business with us because we were a Latina-owned company. She was told many times, listen, if you come into a meeting, please leave your brother at home. Don't bring him to this meeting, please. I mean, we had to put up with just a lot of, that's, but again, because we developed a value-added proposition, we provided a quality product at a competitive price, we developed a niche in the marketplace that we wanted to cultivate, and that was, the federal and the state government procurement side that we wanted to go after, and that what was allowed us, to develop, the company that we went after. So, again, I think it's important. I think that for, Latino youth, that it's important that institutions such as this one, try to continue to promote entrepreneurial role models to the student body so that they can start to develop appreciation and say, hey, you know what? I can be Myrna in 3 or 5 or 10 or 15 years. I want to aspire to be her wife because I see that she's done it. Okay, and I see that it is attainable with hard work. It's not going to be easy. A lot of sleepless nights. It'd be Thursday night and we'd be sitting down saying, how are we going to meet payroll tomorrow morning? Well, believe me, we went to sleep many a time not knowing how that deposit was going to be made the next morning. When you had 30 or 40 or 50 people, we were in a government business, and they were paying us in 90 or 120 days, and our lines of credits were tapped at the bank because we couldn't carry any more debt capital, and it was like, bueno, llama tío, llama tía, para si hace un préstamo. Right, and that's, that's what got us through, but, it's a determination, to stay the course.
That's, this is a very interesting question because I've been thinking a lot about this lately. How did all this happen? I guess my first exposure to people doing business not for someone else to pay them a salary, but to generate their own wealth. It did happen in my family. I'm a product of the Puerto Rican diaspora, so I was raised in New York until I was 14, and then my parents went back to Puerto Rico. And my dad had a factory job, but he also moonlighted as a musician. He was part of the musicians union in the U.S. He played the cuatro and the guitar and the tres, and so he was very solicited. But he also sold Stanley products. Those of you who remember Stanley products. And he went from door to door selling Stanley products. I remember all these parties that would get set up. I think it was the first idea of network marketing was Stanley. And my mom came from a family of costureras. And so they were the ones, the fashionistas of the time, right, who made everybody's dresses in the neighborhood and in the community. And so they wanted me to not be that. So yeah, I was the first of 60 first cousins that actually graduated from college. And so the destiny was that I would get a civil servant job, a nice safe job with a pension and a medical plan. So the idea was you become a teacher, you're done. And then, things happened and I didn't become the teacher and I wound up in this business. But there's an intermediate step there of having worked in a firm here in New York in sales and marketing and being trained as a sales and marketing person. And so when you start learning these mental models, there are different mental models of how do you add value, how do you determine a value proposition, how do you trial close, how do you set up a final proposal, how do you do all of these things. That combined with a passion that comes from a family where there is no time to sit around and think about whether you had a good day or a bad day. You just got to get it together to get to the next day. That drive and that passion helped enormously for me to, and lots of angels along the way, of course, you never do this by yourself, to somehow it all gelled. But those first lessons in taking risk, in living with uncertainty, that life of living with uncertainty, not knowing. It's called the dark night of the soul when you are at midnight on Thursday and can't meet a payroll. And you have convinced all of these people to come work with you. Because you are, right. You've got it together. You've got this great plan, and you've convinced them.
Because they're getting that check.
And they say, yeah, and they resign, and they have kids.
Right.
I don't have children, but they have children, and they have bills, and they have mortgages. And so their risk seemingly is less than yours, but no, it's equal to or bigger than yours. And so I would have these guilty trips about, I convinced all of these people, and how arrogant of me to think that I could do this and do this to these people, and oh my God. And that happens. And it still happens. Consultiva's 11 years old. It still happens. We mean payroll, but there's other stuff out there that doesn't get done. But that passion for seeing a dream, there's nothing like, and Maria and I talked about, what is it that happens to you? You see something.
Vision.
You see it. And you see it, and you smell it, and you feel it, and it becomes you, and you become it, and it's inevitable. And you go for it. It's like a light, and you go for it. What's important in all of what we've talked about is that's really great, because that's falling in love is like that too, right? And it is a form of falling in love. Sure. You've got to understand that if you believe that it's your destiny, you had better stop and take a deep breath and build the ladder backwards so you can get there and understand the risks involved in every step along the way. And when you get there, you can decide it's big enough, it's cool, I can sit here forever and be fat, dumb, and happy. Or, like some of us who are more masochistic say, thrill of the hunt, let's go for the next level. Why not? Got nothing else to do, I feel healthy, I feel successful, I feel empowered, let's go for the next step. You've got to do the same thing. You have to stop, and you have to say, what's my starting point? What's the value proposition? Who's the competition? Do we have it covered? If we think you have it covered, you make the bet, it's a judgment call at that point, and you run for it. But you've got to have that plan in place. And funny things happen along the way. People show up. They show up and they move you along.
So the thing to remember, though, is every time you go to that next level, you're going to have to change. There are going to be new skills. There are going to be new ways of doing business. And so if you don't allow yourself to deal with that degree of uncertainty and that level of discomfort, your chances of success at that next level are reduced. So keep that in mind. I mean, for some people, being in charge of everything is really important. I know for women that we work with a lot, and the studies show, micromanagement is a big issue. You have to learn to delegate. You have to learn to get beyond doing it all. These are important skills that you need to evolve with so that you can continue to grow this business if that's what you choose to do. But we have to close. So I really would love to thank our panel. I think that they've shared their time, their insights, the many lessons that they've learned, often the hard way. And I'd like to thank Studies-Centro and Edwin for facilitating this, making this possible, and all of his staff who did all of the work to get everybody here, and Jesus for letting me give him a hard time. Okay. Bye-bye.
I'll give you a call on that.